Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us another week. Have a great show planned for you this week. My guest later on the show is going to be John Artimez, an attorney at my firm, Bordas & Bordas, at our Moundsville location. But we won't be talking law for the most part. We'll be talking about basketball officiating and the sport of basketball in general. John's a longtime basketball official. They'll share some of his reflections on officiating in the game with us as it's almost March Madness time here. But first, get to some of our usual features. We're going to start off with the quote this week, and the quote comes from Albert Einstein, of course, Wiley thought of as being one of the most intelligent people to ever live. And this is something that he said: "It is the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression and knowledge." I'll say that one more time. It's the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression and knowledge. And I think that's particularly appropriate this week with all the teachers in the news and things going on about our educational system, that we rely upon our teachers to truly do that. It's not just to show up and teach every day, but to inspire the students to learn, to find joy in learning, to want them to express themselves in a creative way that perhaps they haven't before, to bring something out of them that they didn't even know they had in them. Our teachers do that so much every single day. They dedicate themselves to doing that. When you look and see teachers at their own kids' sporting events who have papers there in their laps because during timeouts or at halftime they're grading papers or getting ready for the next day's lesson, you can see how dedicated they are. In the summer, they're going and purchasing materials for their own classrooms out of their own pockets so that things will be nice for the students. It'll be a more friendly learning environment, something where the kids can enjoy showing up every day. And not every kid is easy to teach, just like not every kid is easy to parent. Kids can be very challenging to teach. To have there for 6-7 hours a day, sometimes longer, and to try to get that kid not only to behave themselves, but to really take in the material and be productive and learn something that will allow them to lead good and productive lives. And our teachers do a lot of that. Instead, though, unfortunately, what we're seeing is a West Virginia legislature that hasn't recognized that, that's putting education very low on our priority list. And now we're seeing a teacher strike for the first time in nearly 3 decades in West Virginia. 1990 was the last time that there was a teacher strike. And unfortunately, we haven't, over the past number of years here, recognized the value of education in West Virginia by appropriately paying our teachers, our school service personnel, and other public employees. As they've seen their health insurance rates go up, their salaries, their pay have not. Instead, so what you see is sometimes a net decrease in pay because of that. Some people are saying, well, our teachers are leaving our students high and dry if they strike. They're not there for the kids. And nothing could be further from the truth. These people got into education because they want to help kids. They want to be there for our students. But they've been left with no option. When the legislature continues to refuse to hear them, continues to refuse to treat them fairly, continues to not give them appropriate pay increases, they're left with no other option to try to get their attention. And there's no one that wants to be in those classrooms more than teachers. That's the reason they got in the first place. So if you see them out there in the community, if you see them out on the streets with a sign in their hand, honk your horn, wave to them, say, we're here to support you. We want to see what's right done. We want to see what's fair done. And hopefully our legislature will get the message and do what's right and take care of these folks that are taking care of our kids every day. Because let's face it, teachers are the ones who are with our kids more hours of the day than oftentimes we are. And they're not just there to provide them with academic instruction. Many of them are also there because they're going to teach those kids something about life, how to conduct themselves, and they're going to love them. So many of these teachers provide love to kids that otherwise don't have it. Sometimes they provide them a meal when they don't have it. And oftentimes they provide them with someone to look up to when they have no one to look up to. Let's take care of our teachers. It's time to do it. It's time to quit messing around with these issues and do what's right. Take care of our teachers and school service personnel. I hope the West Virginia legislature does that. These issues have prompted a lot of conversation, not just in the community, but also in the political world. Not just in the legislature that's currently there, but also in those that may be running for office. Bill Ehlenfeld, former U.S. Attorney here for the Northern District of West Virginia, has now thrown his hat into the ring for the U.S. Senate race, where he'll be challenging incumbent Senate Majority Leader Ryan Fern's in November. And of course, the Republicans now control both houses of the legislature. We also have a Republican governor, and those bodies haven't been able to get things done in order to take care of our teachers. And you've got someone like Bill Ehlenfeld who's now stepping up and saying, let me give it a try. Let me try to take care of these folks. In fact, one of the things he said in his campaign announcement is, I've got your back. And it makes sense that he does. Bill's mother, Diana, was a longtime teacher in Ohio County Schools, was one of my teachers. Was a great teacher, and English, journalism, things of that nature, and I probably gave her a little harder time than a student should give a teacher, but I got a lot out of that. I remember writing an essay, I still have it, in her class about what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I went back and looked at it a couple years ago, and I kind of chuckled because it said, I think I might like to be a lawyer or perhaps a football coach, and I've gotten to do both in my lifetime. The one thing I did say was I wanted to have maybe 3 kids, and I've doubled that. I have 6, but that's probably mostly due to my wife, but I've been very blessed to have so many children. But Mrs. Ehlenfeld was a great teacher throughout the years in Ohio County Schools. Bill's sister, now also a teacher. And you see someone like Bill who's given himself to public service through being a U.S. attorney and now says, there's something I can do about this. And he's a great candidate for U.S. Senate. I'm glad he's thrown his hat into the ring, and I think that he'll be a very successful candidate when it comes time to vote in November, because people are going to know and they're going to remember these things and what our Republican-led legislature has done and see, yep, maybe Bill Ehlenfeld's somebody that can do something about it. So big issues there. Also issues in the sports gambling world. Looks like sports gambling may be coming to West Virginia soon. Bills passed the Senate and will be looked at by the House and the governor. And the U.S. Supreme Court's going to have to rule on these issues. District courts in New Jersey have found bills allowing sports gambling to be unconstitutional, but the U.S. Supreme Court's going to be taking a look at that this year. And if they say it is constitutional to have this sports gambling in other states besides those where they currently exist, then West Virginia could be at the forefront of that with respect to our casinos. Wheeling Island Casino would be affected, and of course Delaware North, who owns Wheeling Island Casino, also just recently purchased the Mardi Gras Casino down in Cross Lanes, West Virginia, just outside of Charleston. So sports gambling could be coming to West Virginia, but first the legislature will have to pass it, the governor will have to sign it, and then the U.S. Supreme Court will have to rule on this issue. But if they do, West Virginia could be right there ready to be one of the first to do this, and it could generate significant revenue for the state. It's projected to generate in the tens of millions of dollars on an annual basis. So we'll keep an eye on that and what the U.S. Supreme Court does with this in the weeks to come. We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll have my guest with me, John Artimez. We'll be talking basketball officiating. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
So, how was your first day?
Long. So, Josh asked me about you.
Daddy's home. Go get him.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. The Hardwood Specialists, DeNoon Lumber.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Welcome back to the show. I realized while we were on commercial break that I misspoke during the last segment. I referenced Bill Ehlenfeld as a U.S. Senate candidate. Of course, I'm talking about him going to Charleston and fixing these issues. He's certainly a state Senate candidate and challenging the incumbent Ryan Fern's, but I think I misspoke there a couple of times, and I apologize for that. But anyway, this is my favorite time for the show each week when I have a guest with me, and this week my guest is John Artimez, who's an attorney at my firm, Bordas & Bordas, our Moundsville office, but he's also a longtime basketball official, and he's written some blogs over the past year or two regarding basketball and some of the rules of officiating, and also just some of the ways that players should interact with officials. And I thought maybe a good time with March Madness just around the corner and the high school basketball tournament starting up to maybe talk to John about some of those things here on the air. So, John, good to have you here on the show, and thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Jamie. I appreciate the opportunity.
So how long has it been now that you've been refereeing basketball games?
About 25 years, 25 or 26 years. I started, took my first class the day after my first child was born in 1985. Worked until 1990 and then had to get out for a few years, got back in 98 and been going ever since.
And you've done both high school and college games at different points in your career.
I have. I've always done high school. I've done NCAA Division III and been fortunate enough to do Division II for about 10 years in what used to be the West Virginia Conference, now the Mountain East.
You know, you've written a couple of blogs, as I just mentioned, regarding basketball officiating, players, and I maybe want to start with the most recent one that you wrote.
Okay.
And I think because it speaks to kids, but also to parents, maybe some advice they could pass along to their kids that are playing basketball in terms of how to interact with officials, and it's also maybe just how to act in life in some ways. But maybe what are some of the tips that you could give kids out there and maybe some of their parents?
Well, it has always surprised me that kids tend to approach officials the way they do. Now, of course, it's not everyone. There are some coaches out there who are still old school and tell their kids, don't say anything to the officials, leave that to me, you play, I'll talk to the referees. But by and large, the kids mirror what they see in the stands, what they see their parents do. A lot of times they mirror what they see their coaches do. Officiating's really hard. People sit and watch it on television and they think it's easy because they get to see a slow motion replay of a play and say, see, he missed it. But it's really, really difficult to do. We try as hard as we can. And a lot of times, there'll be a bang, bang play in a game and an official is just reacting to what he saw. If you have two players involved in that bang, bang play and one of them who has been respectful and appropriate to you the whole game and the other one who's been whining and crying and being disrespectful to you the game, human nature is always going to set in. It's not going to be a conscious decision on the part of the official, but human nature is going to set in, and 9 times out of 10, the kid that's been very respectful and very appropriate with the officials is the guy who's going to get that call. And one call a game can make a big difference in the outcome of a game. And it's just always surprised me that players tend to take more of an adversarial relationship or an adversarial approach toward officials than they would with other folks in life.
What's some advice you could give the kids on maybe how to have that more respectful approach, or what can they do to show the officials respect?
Well, I think they can start from before the time we even toss the opening jump ball. When they're doing warm-ups, the officials are always out there observing the warm-ups. Stop by and introduce yourself. Offer your hand and say, my name's, Jamie, and I'm number 23, and good to see you. How you doing? And they go on and continue with your warm-ups. Get us the basketball. I'm 61 years old, and sometimes we referee 3-4 games, in 3 or 4 nights. And if you can save me 10 steps, I'm going to appreciate it. So if the ball bounces away from me, you run and pick it up and bring it back to me, that's something that's going to click into my mind. Don't fake getting fouled. That's the big one for me. If a player who has not done something like that to me in a game, then comes to me in the game and says, Mr. Official or Mr. Artimez, would you watch number 23? He's holding me when I'm coming off of these screens. I'm going to take him seriously, and I'm going to watch for number 23 holding him when he's coming off of those screens. But if he's somebody who's been trying to pull one over on me, flopping on a block charge play, complaining about things that aren't really there, then I'm going to discount what he has to say to me. Just things like that.
What have you seen over the years? People talk about all kids these days, they're not as respectful, that type of thing. Have you seen a change in the level of respect from players toward officials over the years, or has it kind of maintained a steady pace?
I think you always have had players who treated officials with respect and players who didn't. And I don't think those percentages have changed much over the years, but the things that players will say to you, the players who want to treat you disrespectfully, the things that those players will say to you, in my mind, have gotten worse.
Yeah, just a little nastier about it.
Yeah, there are things that players have said to me, like for instance, and some folks may not think this is a big deal, but a year or two ago, I had a high school player refer to me as pal. He said, "You need to call him both ways, pal." And I thought, I'm old enough to be your grandfather, and had I referred to an adult as pal and my father had heard it, I would have paid a price for that when I got home. And just, that's the way kids have changed.
We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll continue speaking with John about some of the rules of basketball that people may misunderstand from time to time. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you. We've got it down to a science, an absolute state of art. We do it all, restoration, cleaning, and reconstruction. When disaster strikes, just pick up the phone. We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
Don't forget to do your homework.
All right, Mom. Trick or treat.
Here you go. Happy Halloween.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. DeNoon Lumber.
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with my guest this week, John Artimez, who's a lawyer at my firm, Bordas & Bordas, in our Moundsville office, and also a longtime basketball official. And really speaking about basketball officiating today, and it'd be appropriate for me at this point to congratulate you. Just learned this week that you have been selected to officiate the West Virginia Boys State Basketball Tournament in Charleston here in a few weeks. So.
I have been, and I appreciate that very much, Jamie. It's a big honor, and looking forward to going down there with my good friend Brian Gauss. And whoever else the SSAC chooses to send down with us.
That's great. I mentioned earlier that you've written a couple of blogs about basketball officiating, and one of the ones that you've written over the course of the last year or two has been about some of the misunderstood basketball rules. And one of those is, over the back. You hear people, fans in the stands yelling, over the back, over the back, over the back. And you pointed out in your blog, and they may not know what they're talking about. Yeah,
there's no such thing as over the back. You can't find that phrase anywhere in the rule book or the case book or the officials manual. Fans tend to believe that if a player rebounds from behind another player, that a referee somewhere ought to be automatically blowing his whistle and calling a foul, and that's just not the case. It's not illegal to rebound from behind. What it is illegal to do is to approach a player from behind and push him out of your way so that you can get to a rebound, and that's two very, very different things. We always like to say on the back is a foul, over the back is nothing.
What is the true call? I mean, you don't go to the scores table and say number 23 over the back. Well, what do you say?
It's a push.
Okay.
It's one of these.
Yeah.
It's a push foul.
And there's different, signals for everything. I mean, you see the push. You see, this. You see, what is this? And you see the referee do that.
If you look in the manual, if you look in the book, this is illegal use of the hands. Sounds like a football call, but it's a basketball call. But if you watch enough basketball, especially if you watch college, everyone has their own way of doing things. Some guys do it this way, some guys do it this way, but it all means the same thing.
The other one that I always hear people yelling from the stands, reaching, he's reaching, and what truly is a foul in that regard?
Well, you're allowed to reach. There's nothing illegal about reaching. What is illegal is reaching and knocking someone out of the way. You've got to have some sort of physical contact to have a foul. But that doesn't mean that because you do have physical contact, you automatically do have a foul. Officials are told to judge everything in terms of advantage, disadvantage. I mean, basketball is a physical game. Guys lean on each other, they push against each other, and as long as one is not gaining an illegal advantage against the other, we tend to let it go. Otherwise, the game's going to be a whole bunch of us blowing our whistle and a whole bunch of those fans yelling, let them play.
Let's talk about block and charge. I mean, one question people may have, they see, a guy driving down the court, goes in to take the ball to the hoop, and there's a defensive player there. Is it going to be a blocking foul on the defense, or is it going to be a charge on the offense? I mean, what distinguishes which is which?
Yeah, there's a real big misconception about block charge, and it's perpetuated in large part by the announcers that folks listen to on TV, on ESPN, and all the other networks. And it could take a long time to explain, but I'll do it as quickly as I can. The first thing that people need to understand is the defensive player is allowed to be moving. The fact that the contact occurs while the defensive player is moving means absolutely nothing. To judge block charge, you have to determine whether the defensive player at first had established legal guarding position. And to do that, all he has to do is have 2 feet on the floor and be facing the guy with the basketball. And that's it. And once he's done that, he is allowed to slide in either direction. The only thing he's not allowed to do is move toward the player with the ball. But he can go side to side and he can go backward. What you want to look for in block charge is that torso-to-torso contact. If you have good torso-to-torso contact, the players come together like a pancake, then 90% of the time that's going to end up being an offensive foul.
Okay. That helped me even understand it a little bit
Good.
more. And I go to a lot of basketball. In fact, spend almost the entire weekends in gyms basketball. And in fact, my daughter's 5th grade girls team last weekend finishes runner-up in the 5th and 6th grade boys tournament at Buckeye Local. So that was a lot of fun. The girls really played well. They lost the championship game by 2 points. Had a big comeback. I think if the game went 2 more minutes, they may have won. But
takes after her mother. Yeah,
she's the coach, so certainly takes after her mother in basketball, not me. Leave the football to me, the basketball to her.
There you go.
John, there's really a need for basketball officials right now, from what I understand.
There's
talking to some of the guys around the valley, they say, hey, some of these guys are not spring chickens anymore. I won't offer an opinion as to whether 61 is a spring chicken or not, but and there's a need for new officials.
Absolutely. There is a tremendous need for new officials, Jamie, and you're correct with the spring chicken analogy. I'm 61, and it's highly likely that I'll be done on the floor at least after this year. Things I like to tell to people, one of the things I like to say to people is every year the players are the same age, and every year I'm a year older. And it gets harder and harder and harder to keep up with them and get in position to see the play the way you're supposed to see it. We have games canceled, lower level games, 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade games, that are important to those kids and their families. We have those games canceled every week because we don't have enough officials who are able to go and referee the games. So people, please watch the newspaper. In August of every year, we start to advertise for the class. It starts in September. We need referees. We need people who are willing to get involved.
It's also a good way to stay in shape.
Oh, it's a tremendous way to stay in shape. It's a tremendous way to stay in touch with the game. And it's a lot of fun. It really is. It's hard, but it's a lot of fun. If you can tolerate the fans telling you you're terrible.
Well, John, I appreciate you being here today. Sometime we'll have you back on. We could talk a little bit of law maybe that time, and but I wanted to get into this basketball stuff while it's this time of year, so I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate it, Jamie. Thank you.
All right. We need to take a break. When we come back, I'll be talking a little more sports. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
Disasters happen. Pick the team that takes care of them all. Powered by offices in Wheeling, Morgantown, and Pittsburgh, Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration is ready to handle any size emergency at a moment's notice. We have the right people, knowledge, and equipment to respond 24 hours a day.
I'm Bob Huggins. When disaster strikes your home or business, tell your insurance provider you prefer the restoration company the Mountaineers call, Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports. And, the Pittsburgh Penguins have been really hot lately on a big winning streak. And, I mentioned earlier in the season that they seem to always start off a little bit slow, but then get hot at the right time and make that run. And, of course, they've got all the things they really need to make another Stanley Cup final run. But, they're coming off of back-to-back titles. That's the first time that had been done in years. And to think they could potentially win 3 in a row is not real likely. But when you've got 2 of the greatest players in the world, and Crosby and Malkin, and you've got a good young goalie, things can happen positively. And the fact that they're now getting on this streak, it can potentially get some home ice advantage through the playoffs, really gives the Penguins an opportunity. I mean, home ice advantage is big in hockey. You go into the PPG Paints Arena up there in Pittsburgh, and it's electric during the playoffs. I mean, regular season hockey and postseason hockey are a big difference in terms of the crowd and the noise level, and I think it's really a factor in hockey. So this is a good sign for the Penguins. They've gotten on this hot streak here recently to try to get some of that home ice advantage. So we'll keep an eye on them and see if they can pull off the three-peat. Speaking of Pittsburgh, the Pirates underway. The players have reported to spring training, and Josh Harrison not real happy. Jay Hay saying, look, if we're not in this to win, I don't know that I want to be here. He's now the kind of elder statesman on the squad, not the oldest guy on the squad, but the longest tenured perhaps. And he's seen all these things with Garrett Cole going, Andrew McCutchen going, and looking around and saying, geez, what are we doing here? If we're trying to build for the future, I'd kind of like to win now. He's in his 30s, and it makes sense, but I hope that he realizes that, let's see how this season starts off. They've got some young arms. We'll see what those young arms do. I don't know if they have the pitching, but, still you do have Marte, Polanco, Josh Bell, who had a really great season last year. And so if those guys can all build on what they did last year and perhaps have really solid seasons, then you just never know. But, of course, they're still in that tough division with the Cubs, and the Cardinals. The Brewers have even done well in recent years. So, and, of course, the Pirates, for whatever reason, seem to struggle with the Reds. So tough division, but let's see what happens. WVU basketball season winding down, only a couple games left in the regular season. Then the Big 12 tournament. It looks like the Mountaineers are on track to maybe get something around a 5 seed or so in the NCAA tournament. Could be affected here or there either way, depending upon what type of run they make in the Big 12 tournament. But I continue to think that the Mountaineers have all the ingredients you need to make a deep tournament run. Experience at guard, a great player in Javon Carter, size inside. They've got the ability to rebound. They play solid defense. Big problem, of course, has been giving up leads in the second half. They get these big leads. I know, against Kansas, they got up to 12 points, and I made the comment when I was watching saying, well, Kansas has us right where they want us now. The Mountaineers just can't seem to find a way to close those games out, but was able this week against Baylor to, not only keep that lead in the second half, but even extend it some. So that's a good sign. But I think the Mountaineers do have all the ingredients, and it's anybody's tournament really this year in the NCAA. There's not a team out there that's just that dominant team you look like and say, how's anybody going to beat them? A lot of parity in college basketball this year. It's going to depend upon who gets hot at the right time and can win 6 games in a row in the tournament. I'm not sure with the way the Mountaineers give up leads, they can win 6 in a row, but I do think they can make a deep tournament run, and if they get a little bit of luck going their way, the ball bouncing their way, who knows? Maybe they can make a Final Four run. That's all the time we really have this week. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you again next week on The Jamie Bordas Show.